I'm going to go through the sticky notes that you need to know for Chapter 3, Evolution, Biodiversity, and Population Ecology. So the case study over here is about Hawaii and its native forest birds. And because Hawaii is an island, it has unique pressures on the species that live there. So what you need to know from this case study is that these islands have a lot of endemic species. So the word endemic means found only in one place on the planet. And a lot of endangered species, because endemic species are also more likely to be endangered. Hawaii's species are under threat from invasive species, which are ones that aren't supposed to be there, that were brought in by humans or unintentionally brought in, like in boats, and we didn't mean to bring them, but we did. But some things human settlers brought in, pigs and goats and those kinds of species to eat, and then they got loose and now they're wild, and they can destroy forests. And then disease as well. Down here on the bottom of page 49, you need to know the definition of a species and a population. So a species, basically, if you cannot mate, you're a different species. If you can mate, you're the same species. And there's various reasons why species can or cannot mate, which are discussed in the chapter. A population is a group of the same species. So when we're talking about a population of sea otters in California, we're only talking about the sea otters in California. Or we can say the population of crows in Santa Clarita. So it's not all crows in the world or in America. It's just the population that lives in Santa Clarita, but it's the same species. Going to the next page, page 50. So in biology, you learn the definition of natural selection, so make sure that you review that definition and what an adaptation is for survival. And that mutations, so small genetic mutations over time, is what drives natural selections. There's a couple of terms to know. They're not quite in your book. They're explained, but the terms that are often used is when we say something is selected for example, out here because it's so hot, rabbits with longer ears that can release heat from their body are selected for. Whereas rabbits with short ears die off because they can't release as much heat, and so they're selected against. We can say that if you have a bad trait, you're also maladapted for that environment. Over here on page 51, make sure that you read through this paragraph and to talk about selective pressures, and especially down here about how environments can change over time, and so species may have to move because the environment has changed. And it's, recently with climate change, we have a lot of changes going on that species have to move or die off or adapt to. But this has also happened a lot throughout history. Environments do change over time. And so make sure that you understand both of these paragraphs. Turning on to page 52, know the definition of artificial selection. So this is basically where humans have selected for traits that they really want in their dogs or their corn or broccoli. And so we've bred together before humans even understood genetics and DNA. We understood that when a pig was extra delicious or extra large, we would want to breed that pig. Well, I guess if it was extra delicious, it would already be dead. But let's say it's extra large and you wanted to breed larger pigs, you would want to especially breed the ones that were larger together. And then people would breed plants in the same way. Know the definition on page 53 of biological diversity, and another way we say it is biodiversity, and that over time new species can form through something called speciation. So this is allopatric speciation, where there's some sort of geographic change that separates two populations. So at this point, they're the same species. So maybe this is a lava field, it looks like, and the patches of forest have gotten separated. And so same species, but over time, many years, this color was selected for and this color was selected for. And so the other colors, the bad colors, died off. And then at some point, they can interact again, but they are no longer compatible, and so they don't breed. And so now we say they're two separate species. So there's different ways that we can have changes to the environment and geographical isolation. So that picture was of lava flows, but glaciers can create this barrier, which is a big ice field on land. Rivers can change course. Mountains can be created through plate tectonics. Sea level rises and floods certain areas. And drought can kill off a lot of plants and change the habitat and isolate populations as well. Going on to turn a couple of pages over to page 58. So let's go down the first column first. So we have natural extinctions that have occurred for many, many, many years. Well, since the earth was formed, we've had extinctions. And so all of Earth system processes, and I'm not just talking about extinction, but all of the things, the water cycle, the carbon cycle, all of these things can be random occurrences. So the water cycle can be random. Some years you could have drought, and some years you could have floods. They can be periodic, so even number of extinctions per year. So now we're talking extinctions. Or episodic, which are big events and mass extinctions. So this process of random, periodic, and episodic can occur with all of Earth's processes. But right now we're just talking about extinction. And so we have the examples of mass extinction, even number extinction, or just random extinctions. It kind of goes along with environmental changes. So environmental changes, like a flood or a volcano erupting, can be sudden changes, or they can be gradual changes, like the climate changing over a few years. And so if you have a sudden or even a gradual change, species have to either change their behaviors, move, or die. So example, the polar bears have always hunted seals off of the sea ice. That's their main diet. Well, there's less sea ice, and so they're getting skinnier and dying of starvation up in the Arctic right now because of climate change. Some of them have altered their behavior and are now eating foods, like they're capturing birds and things on land that they didn't used to eat. It's not great because birds don't give them nearly the amount of food and nutrition that a seal does, and so they're getting skinnier up there. Some of them are dying because they can't find enough food. All right, so we have climate change going on, but we've had climate change in the past too. So we have had a lot of changes over geologic time. And these changes have occurred because of the tilt of the Earth and the way it rotates around the sun. And this can cause the Earth to be warmer or cooler because of the solar energy it's getting because of these two factors. And we'll learn more about this later in chapter 17. So if you don't quite understand this at this point, that's okay. We'll go into it in a lot more detail in chapter 17. But what you need to know for this chapter is that These warming and cooling periods, or episodes of warming and cooling, can lead to more or less glacial ice, and it can also lead to extinctions. So if you think about what you learned about dinosaurs when you were a kid, and they lived in a really warm, when the earth was really warm. And then, well, you know, how did the dinosaurs go extinct? Well, when I was a kid, they said it was climate change, the climate change, not current climate change. But now we think it was an asteroid, which actually changed the climate as well. Drastic change of the climate for many, many years, because the asteroid hit the Earth, shot up plumes of Earth into the atmosphere, which blocked the sun, and so hardly any photosynthesis occurred. So that was a sudden, dramatic change. And so anything that is sudden or gradual can lead to extinction, but also natural climate change from here can lead to extinction and more or less glacial ice. Page 59, we have again the definition of endemic, and so this page goes into it in more detail. But really, when a species is only found in one place on the earth, for example, the Yosemite toad is only found up in the Sierra Nevada mountains by Yosemite. For us, we have an endemic species called the unarmored three-spined stickleback fish. It lives in our river where there's water year-round near Magic Mountain, and then also in the creeks that feed into our river has these little fish. And they're only found in these locations in the whole world. And so they are endangered species. There's a couple of definitions here. We have the background rate of extinction. If you go back to this page, that would be a periodic, so even number of extinctions would kind of be our background normal rate of extinction. And then our mass extinctions would be our episodic or big events. The KT event was a big, huge mass extinction that led to massive cooling. And then we've had 5 previous mass extinctions. We are currently in the 6th mass extinction, and it is man-made primarily due to habitat loss. So cutting down forests, or even around in Santa Clarita, we have chaparral as our biome, and we turn the chaparral into new houses all the time. Turn to page 60. Know this chart here, so know when we are discussing what a biosphere is, know what that means, what an ecosystem is, a community, a population, and an organism. So make sure that you know what all of these things mean. The definition of ecology, the chart, the definition of an ecosystem, which is also down here, so make sure you read it down here as well, and the definition of habitat, which is the place that a species lives. Over here on page 61, on this page, know that a generalist species is one that can kind of live anywhere or a lot of different places, eat a lot of different things, where a specialist cannot. So polar bears are specialists. They really, for the most part, survive on seals, and they hunt on ice. They are trying to adapt and change, but it's not working that great. A specialist is more likely to become endangered or extinct because they again have specialized foods and they have specialized locations where they can live. Specialists also tend to be in habitats that remain constant. So the Arctic ice is usually ice year-round until very recently. It doesn't usually melt and refreeze way up at the top where the polar bears are, and so they can hunt from ice year-round until now. So a specialist usually, but see now a lot of habitats are in flux, so it's going to be interesting to see how species change and adapt. And generalists are usually in habitats that are changing because they need to be able to eat different kinds of food and adapt that way. We'll continue on with the next video.